Welcome to the CEN show, a platform where we learn from the world community. Today, I'm the host, Rasaki Maskani. We have Brother E, and our guest is Dr. Charles Alexander. And I want to show a clip. Well, not even a clip. I just want to show where you can access Dr. Charles's. He has another podcast he's on. It's called Level Up. And he has an excellent video that we put up on our platform. So I want to share that with everybody so everybody could watch it that hasn't, because I think it's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time. Very informational. So let me get to that for you. A second here. Brother Mashinda just joined us. Welcome, Brother Mashinda.
Hey, greetings, brothers.
Yeah, we're gonna show the show that Dr. Charles and his comrades did, called Level Up. And my computer is moving razor slow, so I'm uh I'm gonna come to that a little later because I'm having. Oh, here it is. And Sister Linda is joining us, but it's still moving too slow for me, so we'll come back to that. For some reason, the computer is moving so slower than usual. So this evening, Dr. Charles is going to talk about, and I'm going to read the title. And again, because of the computer is moving razor slow, I'm going to let Dr. Charles go ahead and take over, and he's going to give you the title. Welcome, Dr. Charles. Let's go with it.
Good evening, everyone. And so tonight, our title is not what's wrong with our children, but what happened to our children. And tonight we're going to have a discussion about child and adolescent trauma. And I mean discussion in the truest sense of the word. So I'm gonna throw out a few things, and I want to engage you all and get your thoughts on what it is that we're seeing, and based on what we're seeing, how are we interpreting what we're seeing, and well, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to start off, and again, this conversation is about child and adolescent trauma, all right? And so just fundamentally, a trauma is, any occurrence. It could be a single occurrence, or it could be chronic, or several occurrences that impairs our ability to think, feel, or act. Now, how many of you knew that is fundamentally what psychic trauma is?
Mention it one more time for us.
So a psychic trauma, is a situation or situations that impair our ability to think, feel, and or act.
Okay, I'll get started with that. I didn't know that definition, but I can understand that, and it would cause children or whoever to you know especially like shut down, So yeah, that's a understandable definition, and I will go to the next person, which is Brother Machinda.
Charles is disconnected. Ready to connect.
Yeah. I had some idea, but like you say, not the clinical or you know, you know the, the actual meaning of it. I haven't probably heard it put in those terms, like Brother Rasaki said. As far as the effects of trauma, or the fallout from the trauma. So it does make sense. That definition. I've dealt with a lot of traumatic people in my lifetime. So I know what I've experienced firsthand and dealing with people. Uh, like I say, it's different types of trauma. So, I mean, you could have some physical trauma to your body where you can't operate like you past, injuries, things like that, mental, emotional trauma, so it all, like I say, is understandable, but I look forward to you elaborating on this subject.
Okay.
And that's a great point also by Brother Machinda that there are different types of trauma. And so we're going to hit that this evening too.
Okay, Brother E. Okay, we'll come back to Brother E. Sister Linda, good
Yes, good
evening.
evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Dr. Charles was talking about a general definition of trauma, and
Yes.
were you able to hear it?
Yes, I was.
Are you aware of that definition?
Oh, yeah, yes, I am. And I'm glad that he said that. And that's when I saw the subject matter tonight, I definitely wanted to get
With the term,
Yes, I am used to, and I want to hear more with him elaborate because trauma, and he's talking about children and adolescents. And one of the things is I'm writing right now, literally today, that's due next Friday. I'm writing a grant for somebody, and I have to use about trauma. So that's why I definitely want to hear this because me is working with as a part of kinship, and kinship is grandparents raising grandchildren. So that's that whole thing that's happening now in America is based on a lot of children with trauma. And you're probably going to go through it a lot deeper than I can, but it's going to help me a lot with what I'm writing that's due next Friday. So I appreciate whatever you say. I'm ready to learn and listen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But,
So,
but I'm gonna need you to to contribute as well. This is going to be a discussion. So whatever questions you have, throw those questions out too, and we're going to
Yes.
have some back and forth.
Okay, sounds good.
okay, Brother E, you back?
yes, I'm here.
Okay, were you able to hear that definition?
Yes, I heard the definition. Like I said, I wasn't too familiar with the term he said, but I definitely could understand trauma. Being in an environment that I have been brought up in, and you know, other people have been brought up in as well. And I just want to know more about it.
Awesome. And did any of you think that the definition would be more complex or something longer than what I actually said?
Okay, we had another person join
Okay.
our panel, Brother Greg L. Brother Greg, how you doing this evening?
Doing good. How y'all doing?
Okay, were you able to catch that definition by Dr. Charles of trauma?
No, I did not. I joined when everybody was answering or responding to
Okay,
your question, so I didn't hear it.
so let's get it one more time, Dr. Charles.
So a trauma is something that occurs in response to an event or a series of events that impairs our ability to think, feel, and or act.
Yeah, it's not familiar with what I had in mind.
Nope.
I think it didn't go. I didn't go into depth as a think, feel, and act, but mainly just how you respond to a event or a series of events that has some implication on your life, whether negative or positive.
Mhm.
So along
Yes,
those
yes.
same lines.
Great. And
Okay.
and so and what I was about to start with is that I'm kind of fun. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been a psychologist for I've worked in mental health for 30 years and 30 plus years, and I've been a licensed clinical psychologist for the past 20. But what I've found over the years is that people really think when they think about psychic trauma, they think it's this real complex thing. And there is a thing called complex trauma, but that's not necessarily what I'm referring to. But even that is a little more simple than what the word suggests. And so people think that there's this, that there is just necessarily a whole lot to trauma, and there isn't a whole lot to trauma. As I said, trauma could be a single event, or it can be a chronic, or a repeated event. But what it does, it impairs our ability to function, right? And so if you are traumatized, that means you have your ability to function, your ability to think, feel, or to act, or to behave. You can interchange behave and act. Um, if your ability to function is impaired as a result of an event or a series of events, then that is what it means to be traumatized. Okay. And so it is really just fundamentally that. And I wanted to talk about our 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 children and adolescents, because another thing that I'm aware of is that many times adults think that children aren't paying attention to what's going on around them. And so we end up in situations where people are asking, like, why is my child behaving this way? And it's not that that's not a bad question. It's just not the best question. Because the best question would be, what happened to your child, right? So what happened that your child is responding in this way? Not why is my child responding this way, but what happened that my child is responding this way, or what happened that your child or my nephew or my niece or my neighbor, what happened that this is occurring. And it doesn't really dawn on us to do that, because most of us, or a significant number of us, think that they think childhood is bliss, right? And our children just kind of go through life, and they are, more often than not, unimpacted by whatever's going on around them. There are a significant number of people who think like that. Unfortunately, some of those people who think like that do what I do. So they're mental health professionals. Some other people who think like that, or teachers, right? Some other people who think like that, work in the child welfare system. Some other people who think like that work in the juvenile justice system. So all of these systems that are set up to meet the needs of our children, it is not uncommon to come in contact with folks who don't have a good sense of the lives that children live. Has that been an experience of anybody else on our panel?
All right. Sister Linda.
No, I was going to ask him to repeat exactly what he said.
Which part?
Just the end. No, no, just the end with
Is
the
that
question.
part? Well,
You were
so I'm
saying,
wondering if, so I've come into contact with a lot of folks who either don't understand or don't appreciate the lives that children live. So they tend not to. So when their concern is why kids are behaving the way they are, but they're not really asking or concerned about what is going on or what has
right,
happened.
well, right. And I was just going to say, a lot of people say, well, they'll get over it because they're children. They
Yes.
resist, they resist stuff and they just keep moving on. And so that we never look at what the child has trauma was caused the trauma, like you said. And I like that you said, you stated in the question, instead of saying what's wrong with them, but what happened to them that made them react like this.
Absolutely. And Sister Linda, that's exactly what I typically hear. So I typically hear that they will get over it. Children are resilient. Now, our children are resilient. But and that becomes another thing, is that we believe that resilience and trauma are polar opposites, when in reality it's a continuum.
Mm,
So you could be traumatized and be resilient. Because what resilient means is that you are able to cope with the trauma,
mhm,
get through it, and you do eventually get over it.
mhm,
That's what it means to be resilient, is that you meet the challenge. So the event happens, you could be traumatized, and in fact, the data shows that the majority of folks who experience a traumatic event rebound relatively quickly, right? And so you could be traumatized and resilient. But to your point, Sister Linda, most folks don't recognize the trauma. They just assume that kids are resilient and they will get, they'll get over whatever. And so that when that occurs, we miss opportunities to do good work, and and to be of assistance to children. And and sometimes kids are resilient in those spaces, and they don't even know how they got through, or got over. And so if we're not engaging the children when we are aware of these things, to help them to understand what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing it, and how they're responding to it, some of the stuff they could just go through and not be any better for it. Some of the stuff they can go through and adapt to it, but not adapt to it in a positive way. They can adapt to it and just get accepted, and they can adapt and then just become accepting of whatever that situation is, and then find themselves kind of trapped in that space, right? And so we don't want that either. And so, Brother Ross, I see you shaking your head. What you got some thoughts on that?
Man, I have so many thoughts. But yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking when you are affected by trauma, and then you build these coping mechanisms, and I would say you incorporate it, and you take on those characteristic of the trauma, and you become synthesized by it, and you're sometimes functionally okay, but it's still there.
It's still,
The
yes.
the pain, the suffering is still there, and you just become a part of that pain and suffering, and you inflict it on your environment, I would say. And that's what happens with a lot of the kids that go through, and it's I would say working with the kids, I would say you have at least 2 to 3 per class that that's just been through it. They're functioning, but that trauma lingers on, you know. So I just have thoughts as you talking and as other people are talking. But I'm a
No,
I'm a
so
but go ahead. Go ahead.
so you made a great point, because so that desensitization, children get desensitized, people get desensitized, right? And so sometimes that gets misrepresented or misinterpreted as resiliency, right? So that's a little, and so and that's why we have to have a greater awareness for what our children are experiencing, right? And so and we need to have these types of conversations where we are looking at the various factors and dynamics. Part of the challenge that we have, the Black community that we have in dealing in this space and working in this space, is we need to increase and improve our mental health literacy, right? And so we need to make sure that the adults have the words to express what we're seeing and feeling and thinking. And we need to have the words to express what we're observing, and particularly what we're observing in our youth, right? And so, one of the things again that, in this space that I'm aware of, like, I ask people, so what you think about that? I ain't tripping off that. How you feel? I'm cool. Um, uh, you experienced the loss. How did you, how did you feel when you experienced that loss? Um, I was tripping for a minute, and then sometimes, I just zone out. None of those are mental health terms. None of those are mental health phrases. Those are our colloquial terms. Those are our that's our slang for mental health phenomenon. But they don't tell us how you think and feel. And so when and our young people are likely to speak like that, right? And part of the reason why our young people speak like that is because our adults speak like that. And so when our young people are in situations when they actually need help and they don't have the language to say, and the people who are serving them aren't sensitive, to, cultural language barriers, they get, our kids end up being characterized in problematic ways. You know, at a bare minimum, they'll say, "Well, he said wasn't nothing wrong with him." Well, that's not what he said. He didn't say I was depressed. He didn't say I was sad. He said, you know, I might have been on one, you know,
Mm.
or I was about to snap, you know. And so if you don't understand what those things mean, then you don't know how to help. You might describe the child as in denial about what has going on. You might say that the child is resistant and doesn't want to engage. You might say anything other than that he or she is dealing with something, right? And so another thing that we just have to be mindful of is that we have to always seek to enhance and improve our mental health literacy, because we need to be able to express ourselves, and we need to be able to say how we think and feel, and we need to be able to um, ex- describe and express what we see and observe in terms of the thoughts and feelings and behaviors of those around us. Any questions about any of that?
Well, I wanted to go around. Yeah, I didn't finish going around. Okay, Brother Greg.
Yeah, I actually wanted to chime in on like the previous point. I think you made a great point there as far as like dealing with trauma. Just to even give like a personal example, I've been in relationships where my partners have grown up without their father in their lives, and so that has affected their attachment styles. So a lot of times in those instances where it seems like it can make or break the relationship, they tend to grow closer or to get tighter with me because they grew up without a parent in their life, and so they're anxious and don't want someone escaping from them again. With me, on the other hand, I have an abandoned attachment style, and I think a lot of that came from my father was incarcerated when I was 6, and up to that point of my life, my parents had split maybe like around 4 or 5, so I spent a lot of time with my father. So this was like my best friend, and so at 6 years old to lose one parent to incarceration, and he was incarcerated for 16 years. I kind of from that trauma of losing a parent, of not being there every day, to not being able to experience certain things with a parent, I kind of grew attachment style to where like, okay, I don't want to ever experience that again. So if someone wants to leave from my life, they can leave. I'm not going to hold on. I'm not going to build these attachments with these people to where I know that there's an instance to where they can leave my life and it can affect me, how that affected me. And I've grown with that from childhood all the way into I'm working on it now more in adulthood, but I've seen it through just my experience with relationships where just like we get to the point to where it may be a argument, it may be, you know, a fork in the road in a relationship. And my mindset in those times, being young and not really understanding what, you know, how something from the age of 6 affected me was always, okay, well, if you want to leave, leave. And it wasn't until really I started my own therapy journey to understand like, oh, that really affected me, and it carried over into other friendships, relationships, and just how I go into certain things and the bonds I build with other people. So, you know, to your point of, you know, a lot of times people don't understand, you know, how children cope with things, but also how things affect children. I think that is a really great example of that, for a personal example.
Excellent. Uh, Dr. Charles, I was getting some feedback. That's why I kept muting you.
I wasn't sure what was going on. My
Yeah,
apologies.
yeah, that's okay. So I'm gonna go to let me
Before you go to the
you
next
want to
person,
respond? Go ahead and respond.
I just wanted to make a note. Brother just laid out some. He just laid out attachment style you know, in a pretty. I mean, like excellent. It was. Do so, Brother Greg. Can you say what attachment style means? Can you explain what it actually means to the people?
I can't give a good thorough definition of it, but it's
Where you
basically
can.
how you go on in relationships, friendships, whatever the case it may be, and how you attach to people. So an anxious attachment style with someone when it comes to conflict, they want to go closer, they want to hold that person closer, don't want to let that person escape them because they want to avoid dealing with those feelings of someone abandoning them again. A secure attachment style with someone who is very confident in themselves, and it's very rare that someone is secure. They have to go through a lot of just journey and building up themselves to have a secure attachment style. But a secure attachment style with someone who is very confident in who they are and able to assess the damage of, okay, if this goes this way, you know, I will be affected. If this goes that way, I'll be affected. So they're very great communicators. And then a bandit attachment style, someone like me, is just, you know, to avoid kind of, I guess, like a deferment to avoid dealing with those emotions. I just don't allow people to grow close. I don't allow myself to build those bonds because I understand that push comes to shove, someone can leave, and I don't want to be affected the way I was affected at 6 when someone left my life. And so I just avoid. I'm not. I said it's a avoidant attachment style. I think I misspoke, but this is avoidant attachment style to avoid building those feelings and avoid having that blowback of, okay, I grew close to this person, now this person is gone, I don't want to experience that feeling of this person leaving my life again.
Okay, you on mute, Dr. Charles. Listen, Dr. Charles, can I jump in here real quick?
Yes.
And I think Linda want to get in here too. But we got to go to Brother Ian Mashinda. But I just want to say this real quick. When I talk to young people about when they're dating, have a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship, I always tell them, save some for yourself. Don't give your whole heart away. Because if that person says, look, I want to go and, I want to do something different, that means that when you save that some feelings for yourself, when they leave, you'll be able to cope better. Instead of giving your whole heart away, I say just, don't give your whole heart away. Save some for yourself. So that's interesting. All right. So go ahead, Dr. Charles. And then I'm gonna get to Mashinda, Brother E, and then back to Linda.
So what Brother Greg just laid out, this is like fundamental again to how we relate. That's what attachment style is, and his definition was awesome. It speaks to the way that we interact and relate in our interpersonal interactions, our interpersonal relationships. And so he laid out a couple of the styles and things of that nature. And another thing, we probably should have said this on the first end. When folks disclose, as Brother Greg just did, we have to honor brothers' confidentiality. And so what is said in here stays in here. I mean, we know that this stuff is going to be posted, but I mean, like, this ain't the kind of stuff that you then go and have conversations about. That's what I mean. And so, but I really appreciate him sharing because, so he goes back to being 6, right? So he's able to explain to us what happened, right? Now, somebody's engaging him and they try to figure out why brother act like this, but it ain't a why, it's a what happened. And so he just laid out what happened, right? Now, at 6, he might not have been able to tell you what happened. Or he might have been able to tell you what happened, but not be able to explain why he feels the way he feels, right? Because he's 6. But over time, him dealing with this and him being able to look inside and him being able to attach to whatever resources that he's obviously attached to, whatever those resources might be, he has gained this understanding and he knows what happened and he knows how it impacts his relationships. And this is where we want people to be. And this is where this is how we want to meet and see our young people so we can help them to make the same kind of climb. And so what we see now when we look at Gray, what we see is resilience, right? Now, certainly could still have to battle and deal with whatever that stuff is, but he has great insight in terms of what it is. And so he's able to move forward. That's kind of what resilience looks like.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I want to go to Brother E.
I don't have any comments at this time. I just want to listen.
Okay, Brother Mashinda.
Yeah, everyone said a lot. I appreciate what's been said so far. Respect the brother, giving his personal testimony on what transpired in his life. Seems like he's a strong brother to this day. I appreciate that. I think the topic, what happened, I think that's an excellent topic, to start a discussion, because, you know, I spent many years working with troubled juveniles and institutions. And, what I learned personally, um, as it relates to dealing with them on a professional level, um, finding out, like not only what happened, like say what happened. It's like we can say, oh, he's bad. Oh, these are bad kids. They're all bad. But what I learned in the early going was that each kid, whether they killed somebody or stole something from somebody or broke in somebody's house or whatever they did, everybody had a story. And so as I started paying attention to the individual. These are kids that are from 9 years old, maybe till about 18 years old. And every one of them had their own story. And there's a lot of trauma in their life. How do I know that? Because when I started to learn about their history, their social studies, and reading psychiatric and psychological evaluations, to the best of my ability, of course, that was part of something I had to do to present, in the disposition hearings to try to get them some help to the least restrictive outcome as possible for them to try to get them back into society as productive people. But in that journey of learning, I realized that, trauma is rampant. It's very prevalent in society, even to this day. And a lot of folks and adults as well are walking around in states of trauma. And so as we as individuals who may be able to identify it because it's been trained in the mind, if your ear's been trained, you can see it, you can feel it, to a certain degree. Of course, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist or anything like that, but just the fact that the experiences that I had has given me the ability to be empathetic and sympathetic toward people. And that's so what happens is with all the violence toward each other and with the domestic violence that goes on, the domestic violence that goes on in households and things like that, they're going unaddressed. And therefore, just was it yesterday or the day before yesterday I mean, literally about, where I go walking at around the corner from my house, there was a murder suicide, a white couple. They were quiet, they live in like I say, it's probably about a mile from my house. They just, I don't know what happened, but, of course it came out in the news that, he shot her, and I don't know, I guess she shot back at him, but they both died, whatever it was. So that they had something going on in their lives for them to react, to get to that level. We find out that he was an alcoholic and was abusive to the lady. So I can only imagine, what the trauma that she was dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So anyway, I think as humans on the planet, we can take for granted, just as we walk through life, like what's going on. But I mean, each individual situation has to be can't go unchecked. It has to be, when something happened, like say, what happened? What happened here? What happened there? Then it has to be addressed. And so I guess if you get political with it, as it relates to mental health, like how it's being addressed. So anyway, I said all that to say that a lot of our young people are definitely experiencing trauma in their lives and is going unchecked. And I think there's a push in some regards for more mental health in schools, at least one mental health uh, professional in each school, in certain schools, K through 12 or whatever. But it's like it should be two or three. It should be a whole center of mental health professionals dealing with the community that goes to school there. So, and then to close, I was at work today. I work at the community college level, and I was talking to one of the new teachers. He's retired as a work for a utility company, so he's teaching a class to teach them how to climb the pole, to do the electricity thing. And so he gave me, so he's a new guy, and he was telling me, he said, "Hey man, it went well today." He said, I got about two or three in the back. They wouldn't look like they wasn't paying attention and this and that. And my message to him was, because I spent, over 15 years in the classroom, with my own classes. And I told him, I said, look, you got to engage, you got to get to know your students one by one, understand who they are, and then you know their story. So some of them may be experiencing some things. I said, these might be your best linemen that's going to come out of your class, only if you find out who they are instead of looking at them as, well, if they don't get it together, I might have to get rid of them. Of course, he didn't say that, but I was trying to head that off like, hey, get to understand who you're dealing with. And then, I worked late till about, I'm in Louisiana, so I worked 6 o'clock today. Usually I get off at 5, but I stayed over for the night crew that was coming in, the night classes, to see if they had any needs. And then one of the instructors approached me. There was a 17-year-old who's got his GED and everything like that. So he's back there, learning a trade. Well, the instructor, he's a welder. He's a professional welder, but he didn't know anything about mental health. So he came and told me. He just happened to find me in the office, and he said, "Hey, this guy, I have a student. He looks like he's on drugs. I don't know. He's about to look like he's wobbling or whatever." He was concerned. And it was a good kid, well, a student with good potential. So I went back down there and I checked him out, and I brought him some cold water. It was warm back there. It's been hot. So I gave him some cold water, and he said he was fine. He didn't look to me like as if he was just out of it, but still. So basically, I had to talk with him, but I know the kid's background. His kid has a traumatic background. He's been through a lot because his grandmother's been in his life, and she's been in the office and been telling us things prior to him going down there. So we're kind of looking out for him. But so I talked to the security guard and said, look, don't overreact or anything like that. I said, this kid's been through a lot. And I didn't get too deep with, confidentiality or anything like that, but I kind of calmed the situation down. But my point is just kind of trying to educate the ones that's having to deal with him, whether you're the security guard, if something happens, or the teacher, because the teacher said, I don't know what to do. And I kind of explained to him that, that, hey, this kid's been through a lot. And so we got to approach it. Now you keep an eye on him. And if he comes to school high or anything like that, then let's deal with it from another. Then I'll get involved. I work in student affairs, so I'll take him out of the classroom and have a conversation with him. So anyway, I guess the moral of my little story is, you got to know individuals, and because everybody has a story. So yeah, like what happened. So I appreciate that, Brother Charles, and I'm gonna quit talking for you.
All right. So I think Linda had Dr. Charles.
Yeah, I just had a couple things if I can say. And
Okay.
I agree with what he was just saying, because everybody has a story. And my whole thing is it starts at the home, no matter where your home, whatever type of home environment you came in. It's interesting. I was at a meeting earlier with kinship, and kinship is grandparents raising grandchildren. I was on a meeting on a Zoom in Atlanta earlier, and we were talking to people about IEPs and 504s. So when the brother was just talking about it, is the educational system being involved, and that's key, and it's very important. And from a personal standpoint, the first brother who was talking, Greg, and he was talking about abandonment and attachment, which made sense. And I understand exactly what he was saying, is because I said I'm a grandparent raising a grandchild, and I adopted a child when she was 10. And when she turned 12, I mean, she was doing very well. She ran away, and it was just interesting to me because she had lived in 7 foster homes before she was at my house, and she was diagnosed with what is called RAD, and I had never heard this terminology. And Brother Charles, you probably heard of it. It's reactive attachment disorder, and because I would never understand why she didn't want to hug me or I hug her, and it was just different. And I found out later when we went through therapy and everything, it was trauma, even though they didn't use that word back then. It was just this thing she had experienced through her childhood for the first 9 years of her life. And so she was like afraid of attachment, or she detached herself from anything or in there, everybody, especially females and mother figures, because her mother had abandoned her. And a lot of children go through those things, and we just never know these things, just think they're just standoffish, or until we actually get to the bottom, to the root of it. And because she didn't know how to let go, and didn't get the therapy that she needed when she was a child with me, because she literally ran away when she was 13 years old, and was in the streets because her mom was a former prostitute. And what she learned in the home with her is what her mother was doing. So she thought she was destined to do that. So she ran everything from somebody, a total stranger. And that's how I ended up with raising my granddaughter today. And fast forward, she's, and I'm saying this because men go through a lot, but women, a lot of these sisters go through it. And we don't even know what's the back end of their story. And I have my daughter today, who's my granddaughter. I had her since she was 12 days old, and she's 13 years old now. Finally, it took 11 years before we even found her mother, her biological mother. But it was just through a friend of mine who's an attorney in Atlanta who found her. And when we did find her, she has 5 other children, and she never got the help she needed for therapy. So then, with my daughter slash granddaughter, that affected her as a child. And we have gone through all kind of things. And I couldn't understand it at first. So mental health is definitely very, very real. And she's grown through a lot of therapy, a lot of help and everything. And it starts at the home. And Brother Charles, that's why I wanted to hear what you were saying about mental health is definitely real. And in the Black community, a lot of us shied away from it. And, think like a lot of these young ladies just out there on the street, but they need the attention because they didn't get the attention from the home, either the father or the mother. And most of the times we say that it's a deadbeat dad, but there are a lot of women that's deadbeat mothers. But it's something that they went through also, that they were traumatized. But we just we don't look at it like that. We just look at, she just old whole, that's all she is. And but everybody got a story, like one of you all said. And again, I have to just say it starts at the home.
Right, Dr. Charles, you want to respond to some of these
You all are
comments?
excellent. You are excellent. And so, um, so again, I want to thank Mashenda because yes, everybody has a story, right? So Greg laid out his story. Mashenda was telling us about what he's experiencing in school. So you have to engage the young people so that you can get an understanding and an appreciation of their story. Linda sharing again, not not only does she, kind of piggyback on the story piece, she gives us another term. And so RAD. So I'm not sure if people had heard that term before she brought it up. Reactive attachment disorder. Again, kind of a basic understanding of that. It is that children who experience neglect or extreme forms of mental or emotional abuse, they have difficulty establishing healthy relationships, and because of the neglect, because of the abuse, I think fundamentally what happens is they don't trust adults, and and that's really kind of a defensive and protective mechanism on their part. And so, but the challenging thing that usually occurs, and how we kind of figure out that what we're looking at is a reactive attachment, is that even when they get into situations that are presumably safe, they are unable, or at least on the front end, like somewhere in the process, they're unable to bond with the safe adult, with the safe and nurturing adult. At some point, they're unwilling to bond with the safe and nurturing adult, and sometimes there's some mixture of the two. And so, uh, but again, these are things that if we don't know, we just be like, why he acting like that? Why she acting like that? We're not necessarily contemplating the what, right? And another great example that Sister Linda gave us is, the sisters and the young people, the young boys and girls who are out on the streets selling their bodies. Ain't nobody just signing on for that. There's a what happened that precipitated that. When we see folks homeless, there's a what happened that precipitated that. Substance abuse, there is a what happened that precipitated that. People aren't born to do that, right?
Mm.
And so we want to be thinking about these things. And y'all laying this thing out. I really appreciate this, and that's why I wanted to have a conversation. And this is a fruitful conversation. Go ahead, brother Rob.
Man, it's just so much that just be passing through my head while you guys are talking. And I wanted to say this early on, and I didn't want to say it. I wanted to wait to say it. But the culture that we inherited out of slavery, which was, looking at American culture, which was, the enslavement of us, that was the initial trauma. Just, being carried on a slave ship and then being treated, as inhumane, as three-fourths, what is that, three-fifths human. And they have all these laws that's preventing us from doing things. And we're gathering up, want to be like this oppressor, this slave master. And we take on this personality. We begin to enjoy detrimental things. And that's all it's doing is bringing more, it's reinforcing initial traumas through bloodlines, because you growing up in households where people are justifying doing wrong, and we get this from our oppressor. And a lot of people don't want to accept that. And I keep using this example. we want to have these cocktails. Oh, we want to. It makes you relax. It eases your troubles and all of this, and then it's continually affecting you in other areas that you're not even paying attention to. So, it took me years to just think about what are you doing, and why are you doing it? That's a why. Hey, why am I doing this? So I had to learn and stop doing things that don't make no sense at all and stop justifying why you're doing these things. And then there's another point quickly I wanted to make. I'm gonna come back to that because Brother Hendrick is here, and I want to get his take on what he heard in trauma because we're moving on in time. So, Brother Hendrick.
Hey, evening, family. Yeah, I was out in the back in church, uh, dealing with the Neteru. I wasn't at the other one, but anyway.
Wait a minute, hold up. Let people hear about this church you talk about because it's important what you're saying, and a lot of people don't understand this. So, can you first explain that and then get into the trauma?
Well, for me, I'm not a part of any, organized religion. I'm with the Neteru nature, and every evening, when the sun is going down, I'm back there having a commune with it in my garden. I got a vegetable garden, and I watch things grow and deal with different stuff that's involved in that, which was a lot of stuff. But for me, that's my church, having a commune with nature. So that's what I mean when I say that. Now, I came in on the tail end of the conversation. I think it was some special ed stuff being mentioned about IEPs and 504s and all that. I used to be over that section as an administrator, and the people don't want to follow, the teachers don't follow what they're supposed to do, resource teachers. It's a lot of folks ain't doing what they're supposed to do, but you need some good psychologists in that area. And I used to tell those kids, all of those kids are gifted in some shape, form, or fashion. Just have to find out what it is. But if you never talk to them and get to know them, I think that was Brother Mashenda was talking about getting to know the kid. I used to have an expression, in the jungle, if you're in the jungle, you got to know the beat of the drum. And most of the people that's in education that work in our communities don't know nothing about the drum. They don't know nothing. They just going off what the textbook has taught them in college. They don't take the time to know the student, to see what they're about. Like Brother Machine was saying, the cause, the what if, what happened, and all of that with a kid. And Brother Rasha keeping working at Centennial like I did for about 20 years, you get that stuff every day, all day. So, but love covers a lot. And I found when those kids know that you care about them, you can get them out of a lot of those things. Can't get them out of it, but you can get them to recognize it and try to adjust, them from what they're doing. I don't know if you remember Arthur Williams, Rashaki, the brother. He had a twin brother there, and he was something else, a handful. And I've been in group homes his whole life, and then he got shot, and then he tried to straighten up and almost had his life all the way together about a couple of weeks before graduation, and he had turned the corner, came to apologize for all the rough times he gave me and this and that. And he got killed about a couple of weeks before the graduation. Hurt me to my heart. But, these kids can turn the corner and change. It takes time, it takes patience, and you have to accept them where they are. Can't be judgmental. But like I said, love covers a lot. Also, what I found out with some of them is once they learn the true history of our people, that can be a lightning bolt for some of them. They need something to embrace, something to hold on to, and all that they've learned in school, other than, black is Malcolm X and Martin Luther King for the most part. But I used to bombard them with that type of information, so they can see that we were something before that boat. Actually, we was here before the boat. Really going to be honest about it, creating great civilizations around the world. So, I've seen them change from straight F's to straight A's that got that kind of going, start going to class. But the teachers, you have to, like I heard, engagement of their surroundings as you're teaching them what you're trying to get them to know. Show them from where they live what you're talking about, and they can get it, but you got to know about it. And I had a guy in Linwood, he was an old Jewish guy years ago before I even came to Compton teaching. He had all kind of problems with kids. And I said, man, why don't you just take a drive through the community and, just check things out? Because he lived in Palos Verdes. That's exclusive out here for y'all that don't know, that's out of state. And so he did, and he was able to make a vast improvement in how he was dealing with the kids. He kind of took it to the extreme, though. Start wearing medallions and all this old kind of stuff like the kids were. But he wanted to get it. And with a lot of teachers, they gotta want to do it. And those that look at it like a job, that ain't my job, and I always try to get them out the schools I was in and get somebody in there that's gonna care. And God had a lot of problems from brothers and sisters from the motherland, basically Nigeria. They were the hardest ones to deal with a lot of the time. But anyway, that's where I came in at. That's what the gist I got out of what was said. And I'm going to end by saying, if you're in the jungle, you got to know the beat of the drum. All right.
Thanks for that. Okay, Dr. Charles, I got my thought. All right, so now think about what type of society we live in. We live in capitalism, and everybody's looking to get, not everybody, but because of this type of environment we living in, people looking to capitalize. They want to outdo. So when you're in a position where you're like, we're educators on here, most of us, or some of us, and when we're educating, I think we're thinking about, and I'm not speaking so much for myself, but I'm thinking about those who don't investigate the child to find out what happened. And I got mine. This is how I'm gonna do this. So you got to get yours. So you just gonna do what I tell you to do, and they're not gonna invest in finding out why you acting like this, and what happened. Tell me what happened, or let me refer you to somebody so you can talk to them to find out what happened, and we can work with you so you can be successful. I think the mentality of our society makes people individualized and selfish. That way is, I got it going on, so you don't have it going on. So it's like you're above, you're capitalizing, being that something, and then since they don't want to do what you ask them to do because they're going through something, they have trauma, you're just going to neglect their feelings. So that was the point I wanted to make. All right, Dr. Charles, go ahead.
Again, you guys are great points. And so one of the things, so earlier on, Mashinda mentioned that there are many different types of trauma, and so so there's physical abuse, there's mental abuse, there's emotional abuse. I think those things are pretty you know easily understood. Uh, in the child welfare space, the type of abuse that happens most often is neglect, and that is the denial of just basic basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter. So neglect is really the most prominent form of abuse. Then you have domestic violence, children witnessing domestic violence. You have community violence. One of the things that a couple of things that I'm sure that we're not always thinking about children. Uh, we're not always thinking about children, and we're not thinking about children before, during, or after natural disasters. That's just not the first thing that we're thinking about. And children and the elderly and folks who already have some kind of mental, emotional, or physical disorder otherwise, those are the most vulnerable people. They're the most vulnerable people before a natural disaster. They're the most vulnerable people during a natural disaster. And they're the most vulnerable people after a natural disaster. But we're not always thinking about them. In natural disasters, the first thing that we talk about on TV is the loss of property. And that's where people think. But that goes to what Brother Ross is saying. This is a capitalistic piece. And so our concerns are about the material. So we have these material concerns that cause us to be um, other than mindful and bordering on neglectful when we think about our young folks. And so, but I guarantee, like, just most folks aren't thinking about that. We see a landslide, we think, man, that house is gone. But what about the child that probably lived in that house? Even if that child is okay, he or she is probably traumatized because the place that was safe, the place that was home, just slid down the mountain. Right? We're not really thinking that. When we see these wildfires, what about the child? Right? He or she probably scared to death of fire from going forward. Everything that they've known is gone, demolished. Like these folks we see over in Hawaii. Some of the folks are native, they live there. Some of the folks are visiting and trapped there. You got folks wading out into the ocean because that's the only safe place to be. That is trauma, right? But again, what are they telling us? This many buildings are demolished. There's 100 deaths. What about all of the rest of those people? What about those little people, right? What about the little people who aren't even there, who are just watching this stuff on TV, right? So these are the types of things that we have to think about. And then Ross, you're talking about our experience in enslavement. That gets into historical trauma, and that's the collective experience that we all share. And that's that experience that has been handed down to us, uh, literally through history, but also genetically. Our bodies, our genetic code was changed over that period of time. And so these are some of the what's that we have to be mindful of, right? And so like with that in mind, um, are people familiar with the phrase uh, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? And so, like when Greg was speaking earlier, he was speaking of adverse childhood experiences. When he was 6, I think his parents were separated, his uh, and then his I think he said his father had to go away. So that's 2 ACEs right there, right? So that's 2 adverse childhood experiences. And so um, anything else is just an addition to, right? And so ACEs are dose dependent. The more ACEs you get, uh, kind of the worse. There's a great likelihood that your outcomes in life, you know, are troubling. Let's say um, folks who have 5 to 6 ACEs or what have you tend to lead shorter lives because they tend to have substance abuse issues. Um, they probably have some health issues. They tend to be more risque, so which is what is part of the reason why they have the health issues. But because they're risque, they are engaged in behaviors that put that oftentimes put their general health and well-being at risk, and even put them at risk for premature death. But the likelihood of that happening, the likelihood of a shorter lifespan increases based on the number, based in part on the number of ACEs, right? And so one of the things that, again, that's not uncommon, you talk to somebody and you say, young person, so what's going on? Well, I lost my dad, and you'll hear people, in a very, very insensitive way say stuff like, you know, that happens to everybody, you know, but you don't have any idea how many other losses that child has had, how many other aces. And so, in each loss is an ace. And so these are things that we have to be thoughtful about. Brother Henry, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, what you say ACEs?
It's an adverse childhood experience. So
Okay.
ACEs is an acronym. Yes, great question. Sorry about that. And so those adverse childhood experiences, they can accumulate, and then they accumulate. Then people start to have uh, behavioral issues, social emotional issues, and kind of depending on how well they're resourced, they might start to engage in substance abuse to kind of manage the 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 social emotional issues. Once they start delving into the substance abuse, then they're more vulnerable to other risque behaviors, and the combination of those risk behaviors and the substance abuse put them at risk for you know other health conditions, primarily a range of issues with their um, cardiovascular system, and well, really all of it: cardiovascular, respiratory, and you know renal. So all of the organ systems, and then that results in early death. And so these are things that we just have to be mindful of. A child who lives with a person who has a chronic illness, that is an ACE. A child who lives with uh, a person who has a substance abuse issue, that's an ACE. You know, parents separate, that's an ACE. Parents are together, but it's a chaotic relationship, that's an ace. I mean, so we have to be thinking about these things, because those are the types of things, again, that also impact what? Your attachment style. And that's what Brother Greg gave us on the front end, is the dynamics that are going on in the household, and that's what Sister Linda referred to as well, is that, this stuff kind of, it kind of starts in the household and then the community. So our household, the extended family, and the community, what are those things? What is the child being exposed to? And intentionally and unintentionally. And then what are just some of those things that are in the air? Just some of those things that may not be impacting the child directly, but somehow or another he or she becomes aware of. Those things had a potential to be, significant stressors. And that's part of the reason why I was, talking about the the natural disasters. Other things that we don't really talk about. Um, Forced migration and human trafficking, all of these things. These things are going on all the time. These things are on the minds of our children too. And people ask me all the time, like, should we be having these conversations with our children? Yes, but you got to have it at the level at which a child can understand. Now, most of the times when we're not having these conversations, is not because we can't get it to a point that the child can understand. We don't have a conversation because we might not be comfortable with having a conversation. Just, first and foremost, or we might not know how to get it to that level. And it's okay if we don't know how to get it to that level, but we have to set up a situation whereby the child can have somewhere to have some of these conversations. Because if the child is asking questions, he or she is aware of what's going on. And so we gotta have the conversations at the level at which the child can manage and appreciate it. And I mean, and we'll know what level the child understands based on the information that the child, I mean, based on the questions that the child asks. And so you should be able to give the information, find the information that can help the child understand. And that's really kind of part of how we, that's one of the things that has to happen in terms of how we manage the well-being of our children, is that we have to help our children to ferret out, truth from other things, you know. So we all have to be mindful that there's information, there's misinformation, and then there's disinformation, right? So information, that's good stuff. Misinformation is, inaccurate stuff. Disinformation is intentionally providing uh, data that is distorted for the purpose of confusion, right? And so we're going to be teaching our kids this types of stuff because this is a part of how they learn to cope. So, questions, comments.
I got a comment. Uh, when I was teaching and coaching, I had this idea because it usually takes a good year, to learn a kid. Got a lot of classes, so I was of this mindset with coaching and teaching. Let that kid have that teacher for 2 to 3 years. You know what I'm saying? First, you're assessing where they are, and then usually they don't get it to the end of the year. Then they go to somebody else. What if they were coming back to you and you were teaching that next higher level or coaching that next higher level? You got freshmen, then you go to frost soft, level, JV level, and you got this kid. You don't have to start from A every year because you had them already. You know them and they know you, and then you don't have to waste a whole lot of time getting to know them. You know exactly what they need. They know what they're going to get from you, and you can move on up, the scale. That's something I always wanted to do, but I was never in a position, to implement it. But I know that can work because you already know the kid. So and that's a lot. That's a lot. Instead of starting from A every year with 100, but you have about 180 kids a year, Rashaki?
Uh, somewhere between about 130, 150.
Oh, numbers are going down since I quit working.
Well, yeah, and then also you don't want, if you can avoid having the class too large, you would want to do that. It's probably best to have anywhere from 20 to 25 kids in per class because it's more doable. When you have more than that, especially with inexperience of teachers or their classroom control, it could get a bit much, and it
You're,
Right.
impacts the whole school.
you're
Yeah.
inexperienced, yeah, but I didn't. I used to give
Can
40.
can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, yes, Linda. But wait,
Yes,
go ahead.
the brother
Let's
Charles, does he have a book out or anything? Because so you can share your information, the
yeah,
knowledge that you have.
okay, Brother Charles, and then I want to come back to Hendrick on that. I want to ask him what I didn't hear what he said. But go ahead, Brother Charles. You have any books out or anything?
I do not have any books out. Um,
And the reason why I'm suggesting maybe you need to write something on a level, like a fifth grade level where parents can understand.
mhm.
Oh,
Because I
that's a
mean,
that's a challenge for you, Dr. Charles.
Well, actually, I am like what we're talking about today,
Yes.
I am actually in the process of writing an article about this. So
Okay.
I'm in that space. But to your point, I could certainly convert that into a book. I do a course for the International Trauma Training Institute. It's an online course, and it's 6 modules about the different forms of trauma, and I try to cover things based on age and gender, sexual orientation, and the whole nine. And so, um, so I'm kind of solidly grounded in this space, and
Okay.
I am working on an article right now. So, much of this conversation right now is what the article is about, is what happened. And in the article, I'm looking at the past 25 years to give a
Mhm.
context of what has happened. And that should better inform us about what we're looking at when we are experiencing our children. And more importantly, we have to start to look at how we've experienced the 25 years. Because that's another thing that I've learned is that if we talk about mental health at all, is usually parents telling
Correct.
me about their kids. The
Mhm.
parents rarely say, I'm having a difficult time dealing with X, Y, and Z. And 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 why that is an issue is that the parents, we're dealing with whatever is going on real time, but we all have our own set of adverse childhood experiences that we were already dealing with before this next series of stressors came, right? And so our kids, they get their cues from who? From us. And so if we, are challenged in coping with whatever it is we're experiencing, then that has a great potential to have another adverse effect on our children. So that's what we got to be thinking about. But I appreciate that encouragement, sister, and I take the challenge.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. And I had a reason for asking that because, I mean, of course, I'm loving what I'm hearing and learning also, but I need and Ross Keat, I got to get his information because I am having a Black Authors Virtual Book Fair in October, and I want your article to be in there.
Well,
Can you
I'm
repeat
putting
that,
my
Linda? We didn't
Yes.
hear you clearly. Can you repeat
Okay.
that?
I'm hosting a Black Authors Virtual Book Fair in October of 2023, and I'm not just reaching people in America and students in America. I'm doing this around the world. I have some people that's involved with me in Ghana, in Africa, everywhere. So, and your article is key. It's very important because I don't have anybody. I have a lot of authors that with their books, but I do not have anybody that's dealing with mental health, especially with the children. And even though it's not a book yet, it's an article. So that makes you an author. So when you get it done, and of course copywritten, I like to make sure I get your information and make sure that you put it in the Black Authors Book Fair.
Absolutely. I just put my email address in the chat.
Okay, yes. And I will be sending you an email. I'll be sending you the oh, and in fact, if you can go on the website tonight, it's titled www.blackauthors.virtualbookfair.com. And you can pull it up and you can send me a message on there also. And I'm Linda Shorter.
Black Authors.
Yeah, blackauthors.bookfair.com. And it's all lower caps.
Got it.
Okay, and I'm looking forward to reading this article because I need to hear it and share
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
Okay. Brother Henry, you was saying about the class size?
Oh, that never made me ever any difference. It was a union thing, but I just took them anyway. Didn't make me no matter how, what size, but I usually had like 170 kids a year, 5 classes. So,
Now, one
but
thing about
it's just,
teachers like you, Brother Henry,
Coach,
You have the
from
you
being,
have the what?
from being a coach, I always dealt with large numbers, so I kind of
Yeah.
was doing it, so it wasn't that difficult for me. But I can imagine a teacher that just starting out that don't know nothing trying to deal with overcrowded, but even the normal size, they're gonna have problems. But
Well, well, see that's it in a nutshell. If you, I study the environment, and you, as you know, you have many teachers that are just hanging on by a thread because of the the traumatic type of students that we deal with, and it takes a special kind or a person that's familiar with this the environment to be able to handle a large amount of students. And like you said, some of the teachers are not able to handle a regular size class. So it's a challenge, but I take my hat off to teachers like you. And you had, I know you remember Mr. Hibbert.
yeah, yeah,
He was able to command the attention of 50 or more students on a regular basis. And I went and observed him, and I was amazed at how he was able to command, their attention. And it's you only get those type of teachers. They're rare, So I take my hat off to teachers like y'all. So that's what I wanted to address. All right. Do anybody else have a question or comment for Dr. Charles Alexander, Brother E. Mashinda, uh, Brother Greg?
Nothing for me. Just want to say thank you. This was a very insightful, a great conversation. You know, we all were engaged, but I think we all took away a lot from it. So thank you for this.
Thank
Right,
you. I really appreciate that. And again, I appreciate your disclosures.
brother, Brother E.
Yes, Dr. Charles, going forward, what does community can we do to try to heal these children?
Great question. And again, I would say, like, first and foremost, we have to be willing to kind of acknowledge that any of this might be going on with us, as adults, and sometimes we're not willing to do that. And so, we have to kind of, we have to do some soul searching, uh, kind of to start with, and uh, and then be able to understand, what it is we're experiencing and why. So we have to kind of figure out what are the things that we experience that we need to know what are the things that make us happy, what are the things that make us mad, what are the things that make us sad. We need to be in touch with that. We need to be able to have the language to explain that, and then we need to teach our kids that. Right now, uh, as parents, and aunts and uncles, and big brothers, big sisters, and people with community engagement, the other thing that we have to be able to do is to recognize when our children are in distress, right? And so we can talk about some of those things real quick. So, if you see a child that's, their general disposition is irritable or angry, we want to know what happened. If there's a child that's typically pleasant, and then you're seeing him or her, you know, present in a way that's really different than what you're accustomed to, and that is irritability and anger, then you want to know what happened. So any changes in behavior, that those are keys to try to figure out what happened. uh, if you're aware that a child is having difficulty sleeping, they're having difficulty getting to sleep, or they're having problems staying asleep, or they're having problems with waking early, um, or even some combination thereof, usually sleep disturbance is a sign of, there's some stressors that are in the child's environment that are, impacting his or her ability to sleep. Now, how you might know that otherwise, and you're not a parent, wherever you engage that child, you got a child that should be, engaged in whatever's going on real time, and he or she is asleep, and you recognize that time after time after time, then you can probably surmise that there is some sleep disturbance. And now we want to know what's causing that. Neglecting responsibilities. Kids are unable to get done what they have to get done. It's not always because they just don't want to do it. Sometimes it's because they are overwhelmed and they got other things to do, or they might be preoccupied with safety issues, right? So a child that's worried about getting beat up at lunch or getting beat up after school, he's probably not paying attention in class before lunch, and he probably not paying attention in class before the last two classes at the end of the day before he got to go out and meet the bully. He probably not paying attention. He's trying to figure out how I'm going to get through this, and so these are things that we have to be mindful of. And again, behavior changes. Are we seeing changes in appetite? You see changes in appetite, there's probably some stressors going around. Um, and kind of more physical complaints and more sickly, then there's probably some, again, some kind of stressors that are going on in a child's life. And like the one thing, when you have a child who's like physically sick, who's has been healthy or what have you, and then all of a sudden, it's just these recurrent sicknesses or whatever. Well, one of the things, if you have chronic stress, that weakens your immune system because uh, your body is producing the stress hormones that ultimately at some point start to impair the functioning of your immune system. And then also again, because your body is producing those stress hormones and you're hyper alert, then you're probably having difficulty sleeping. So somewhere between the lack of rest and potentially the changes in eating habits and um, and just the amount of attention that that a child might be given to whatever that stressor is, the child's body gets worn down and they're more susceptible to uh, to illness. And so, one of the main things that we have to do is to be able to know what it is that we're seeing. you know. Now, certainly there could be times where, a child put his head down because he struggles in math. That's plausible. But that's a what, right? What happened? He had a bad experience in math, so now he's avoiding. But, oftentimes we kind of get into that oppositional behavior part. He's oppositional, he's defiant, but he might not be that, right? And it could be a situation where the people in his household didn't have great experiences in school either. So he can't get support at home either because his parents might be scared of the school. School might not be a good place for them. And so these are all what's that we have to find out. So that's a great question, brother, because these are the things that we have to be willing to do, and oftentimes it requires that we slow the process down so that we can be more thoughtful about how we engage the child and that child support system.
All right. I think we're going to take our pause. But before we take our pause, everybody, first of all, I want to tell you, Dr. Charles, this is an excellent topic. And this is something that we definitely need to know about it because trauma is one of the main issues that's occurring with all of us. So, like you said earlier, we don't, even adults need to look at themselves, and I call it self-evaluation, and that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be that's going to be a text in the next few years that I'm going to provide a little insight on from my perspective. So one thing I wanted to show everybody earlier, I'm gonna share the screen.
I want to ask Brother Charles a question while you're sharing the screen.
Go ahead.
Are you a clinical psychologist by trade?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I figured it was. Where the conversation.
Okay, so what I was gonna show earlier, this is Dr. Charles Alexander. You got Larry Fields and Reddick Hudson. In this show, he allowed me to put this up on our YouTube channel. This is an excellent video. It's called the name of the show is the Level Set Show, and it's the Roberts Court's decision. And they not only talked about that, they talked about a few other things also. But it was very informative, and I want to encourage everybody to check it out. It was about 2 weeks ago. I'll give you the exact date of it when I put it up. It was July 30th, 2023. So I encourage everybody to check that out. And then Dr. Charles mentioned math. You go to the website Community Education Network. This deals with the psychology of math, and it's a perspective that I wrote. Now it's from a 17-year observation of my students, and basically we want to see math in a positive light, and we want to eliminate the negativity, because one of the things that people they psych themselves out by saying math is hard. That's the first thing they say, and that's a myth. Only thing hard is hard surfaces. So that paper is I think it's a pretty good observation for people and I have a parent guide in there also, so that'll be good. But Dr. Charles, this is excellent, and we need to do more of this. And I'm going to go ahead and end it. But before we end it, I want to tell you who we got next week. Professor Ra on Conscious Corner. On his show, we're going to have Ronnie Roberts, and we're going to talk about immigration. And then on the CEN show next Wednesday, we have Brother Thomas coming, one of our team members. And the title is Women Are Not Kobadai and Men Are Not Clownfish. So that Kobadai, if you want to look that up, it's spelled Kobudai.
Koboda. I heard of that. What's it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us the definition? Just because I'm just trying to.
I don't know the exact definition, but he, about maybe a month ago, he was kind of telling me about it a little bit. I don't
Okay,
want to.
can you spell it again, please?
Kobudai. So women.
K-O-B is B-O-B is in boy.
Yes, Kobudai.
Oh.
And I know that's going to be an interesting conversation and presentation, because Brother Thomas goes real deep to try to clarify things for people, and this is going to be a good one for sure. So,
Oh, okay. I see what he's doing. A fish that's shift.
yeah, you don't spoil it.
Okay, I won't spoil.
Don't spoil it.
How about I just say it's interesting? That's
It's
all.
very interesting.
To other people, yeah.
Okay, so he's gonna break it down. All right, folks. So each one teach one in Conscious Corner. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
You too.